All right, so today is a pretty big day for me because I'm playing 1020 for the first time in my life. Now, the question is, how different will this 1020 be from the 510 at Morongo when the straddle's on? 5, 10, 20. And I think the answer is pretty different. Alright, welcome back to the channel, guys. We're going to jump straight into the action today here at the Bellagio playing some 1020 no limit. A quick note before getting into the hands, however, I bought in for $5,000 because I wasn't sure how much to buy in for, but once I arrived at the game, I noticed most hands had the straddle on, so once you consider that it's 10, 20, 40, $5,000 is really not that much. Anyway, moving into the first interesting hand of the night, there's a $60 open from the under the gun player. The straddle was not on in this hand. We see a call from early position before looking down at ace king from the small blind. Definitely going to be raising it up here, so I make it $320. The under the gun player makes the call and the player behind him makes the fold. So heads up here to a flop of 10-8-7 with two spades. It's no secret that this is probably one of the worst flops we can get. Even if we did have a hand like aces or kings, it would be pretty difficult to continue against 3 streets of aggression from our opponent here. And that's kind of the beauty, but also the madness of playing deep stacked poker. With like 100 big blinds, you can pretty much get it in every time with an overpair and it's never that much of a mistake. But calling off with like 250 big blinds, now things start to get a lot different. So anyway, because of all these factors, I decided to check it over to him and he checks it back. Turn card is the jack of clubs, as if this board wasn't miserable enough already. Again, I'm just going to check it over to him. Pretty much done with the hand at this point. Once again, he checks it back though. We go off to a river, which is a complete brick. I check it for a third time, but this time my opponent does not check it back. Instead, he elects to bet $240. It's a pretty annoying spot since we're getting such a good price to call, but at the same time, our hand is so face up that he could easily be going for some thin value with even something like just an 8 or maybe a 10. So even though our opponent has given us a fairly appetizing price, we will have some better hands to call with here, such as overpairs or maybe even the occasional sets, such as pocket jacks or pocket tens. So I don't think too long about it and just let this one go. Not really the most exciting hand in the world, but it kind of goes to show how big this game is because it's been like 5 minutes and we're already down $350-ish. Pretty cool, huh? In the next exciting hand of the night, I open pocket threes in middle position to $60. Action folds to the big blind who makes it $160. And even though you really shouldn't be defending against re-raises with small pocket pairs, in this situation it seems to make a lot of sense for 2 reasons. Number 1, we're in position against probably the only player at the table who isn't a pro. And number 2 is simply that he didn't make it that big, only $100 more. So seems like a straightforward call to me, so that's what I decided to do. And we're off to a flop of ace-5-4 with a couple of diamonds. My opponent c-bets $180, and I think this is one of the better candidates to call in position and try to navigate some turns. There's so many turn cards that are going to be better for me than him, such as a deuce, a 3, a diamond, maybe a 6. Just so many cards that will allow us to start bluffing. And who knows, we might even get there, right? So I put in the call and we're off to a turn card, which unfortunately is not one of those good ones. It's a 10 of clubs. So not only do we not get there, but we don't even get a card that we can attempt to bluff on. Especially so when my opponent fires one more time, this time to the tune of $500. Nothing to do here but let it go, I think. Once again, I shed a little tear, wipe it away before anyone sees, and muck my cards. Well, it's update time here. I've been in the game for like maybe 2 hours and I'm down like a couple of hundred, but a 5100 opened and a bunch of the pros went to that game and our game got filled with a bit more of a fun crowd. So it looks like the game might be a little better and it's kind of incentivizing me to buy in for all the cash I brought, which is like another 10,000 on top of the 5 that I have on the table. I don't know, just an idea I'm tossing around, probably a terrible one, but this next hand, I put on the $40 straddle. Action folds to the button, who makes it 120. The small blind and big blind fold before I look down at ace queen. I'll for sure be raising it up here since the button will have all sorts of stuff in this situation. And ace queen will be ahead of almost all those holdings, so I make it $460. The button thinks it over for about a minute before deciding that the best course of action is to rip it all in. However, he only has around $1,600, and while that's no small chunk of change, it's only 40 big blinds, which makes it a pretty straightforward call in my opinion. So once I realize he doesn't have much, I make the call. So we're off to the races with over $3,000 in the middle. No big deal. Anyway, he asked if I want to run it twice. I typically prefer to just run it once, but when someone asks me, it feels like a dick move to say no. So we're going to go twice here. And long story short, we end up chopping it up, even though we flop a pair in both occasions versus pocket threes. So all things considered, I guess it's fair, you know? He wins one, I win one. That's typically how math works, right? Moving on, in this next hand, we are five-handed. There's an early position open to $60, and I look down at 9-8 of spades on the button. I think you can go either way here between mostly making the call and sometimes mixing in a raise. In this situation, I decide to raise it up. I make it $220. Now, the big blind makes the call, but the original raiser folds. Not exactly the anticipated result, but that's quite all right. Flop comes down Jack, Jack, 9, and he checks it over to me. And I feel like betting here is fine, but checking seems like the wiser option since he cold called a re-raise out of the blinds. Most of that is going to consist of pocket 10s, maybe even pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket 9s. We're either going to be way ahead or way behind against those holdings. So I decided to just check it back and see what he does on the turn. Turn card is the ace of diamonds, and it seems like it's mostly a brick. The only ace our opponent should really have is maybe like ace queen suited, the occasional ace jack suited. I suspect ace king would re-raise pre-flop most of the time, and ace 10 suited is probably just going to fold pre-flop. Anyway, my opponent checks it for a second time, and I see no value in betting here, so I just check it back. River card is the jack of clubs, and he checks it over to me for a third time. And I really don't think there's much value in betting here. If anything, we'd probably be looking to turn our hand into a bluff to get folds from like pocket 10s or maybe pocket queens, but seems to me like checking back is completely fine since we beat all those other pocket pairs below the 9. But that's not the case this time when my opponent flips over ace queen of clubs. So he was laying in the weeds, waiting for us to make a bet. And honestly, I might have if I didn't have a 9. So nice hand. Well played, sir. In this next hand, we're five-handed, and yours truly is in the straddle once again. The early position player opens to 120. The big blind makes the call, and I look down at ace-jack offsuit. Now, I think you can go either way between just calling and putting in the raise. The reason I'm leaning a little more towards raise in this situation is because, one, we're five-handed, so the early position player is going to be opening a lot wider than normal. And two, once the big blind calls, there's a little extra money out there which incentivizes us to raise, since if the big blind had a strong hand himself, he would have been putting in the raise. So for those reasons, I decided to raise it up and make it $580. Now the early position player makes the call, and then the big blind makes the call. I gotta say I found this a little surprising since you don't usually see people flat twice pre-flop out of the blinds. Or I mean, you do in like 1-2, 1-3, even 2-5 games, but as you start to go up the ladder a little bit, people tend not to do that. But anyway, we're off to a flop here, three ways, which comes down Jack 9-3 rainbow. Obviously an amazing flop for us, but because the board is so dry, there's really no need to bet too large. So once the big blind checks it to me, I bet around 25% pot, $420. The early position player makes the fold, but the big blind makes the call. So at this point, I'm sort of narrowing the big blind to hands like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, maybe pocket 7s. Seems like him calling twice pre-flop would usually indicate hands like that, and the fact that he continues on this flop seems more than standard with pretty much all those holdings, since I could easily still have ace king or ace queen, etc., all of which obviously he still beats. So we're off to a turn card here, which is the queen of clubs, and he checks it to me one more time. Even though this is an overcard to the jack, it's pretty much a brick in my opinion. I guess he could have a hand like queen jack suited, which now we're losing to, but if you look at the distribution of the suits, there's only one remaining combination available, which would be queen jack of hearts. So I'm definitely not just going to assume that we're beat. But once he checks it to me, I doubt we're going to get another street of value here from all those hands I mentioned earlier, like pocket 10s, pocket 8s, 7s, etc. So I check it back, and we're off to a river card here, which is the 3 of diamonds. Seems like a pretty clean river to me. My opponent's got around $2,400 behind, and the pot is around $2,500. And I feel like we can go for some value here versus, like I said, pocket 10s, maybe Jack 10 suited, pocket 8s, since our hand does look like it could certainly be Ace King or Ace 5 suited, one of those pre-flop bluffs that ends up missing everything and then decides to bluff. So I decide I am going to be betting for value here, albeit a little bit thin. The question is how much, and this is where I think I made a mistake in the hand. I elected to just go all in, but looking back, I feel like that's not really the best size since it probably lets him fold out all those pocket pairs that we're trying to target. And realistically, he will probably only be calling with hands better than Ace Jack against that size. I actually looked into it later on, and turns out I'm supposed to bet like around 40% of the pot here. So a bet here is actually okay, but this sizing is not okay, and we get instantly punished when my opponent snap calls, and yeah, he's got pocket 9s. So we're going to lose a pretty big one here. I don't know, I guess if he puts me on Ace King and ends up making the call with pocket 10s or pocket 8s, I look like a hero, but don't want to be results oriented, just want to make the best play I can. And in this case, this was certainly not it. So at this point in the night, we're stuck a few thousand, not really running that good, definitely not playing my best, but we're going to push on because once I set out to make a vlog, that vlog is going to get filmed no matter what. Moving on to the next hand, the straddle is on once again. There's an early position open to $100. I look down at Ace King suited in the big blind and raise it up to $400, and my opponent makes the call. Flop comes down 10-8-3 rainbow with 1 heart. Could go either way here. Similar to the first hand, this board is much better for my opponent than for myself. But there is a heart out there, and he's not going to have that many strong hands either. It's kind of a neutral flop. So I feel like a small bet or a check are both fine. In this case, I decide to bet small, $240, and my opponent makes the call. So we're off to a turn card here, and there's plenty of good ones in the deck, right? Anything higher than a 10, maybe a heart. Dare I say an ace or a king? Nope, how about the 7 of clubs? All right. So this one is going to improve a lot more of my opponent's holdings than my own. So to reflect that, I check it over to him and he checks it back. River is the deuce of hearts, and on this run out, it makes really no sense to bet here. A bluff would be fairly suicidal. A value bet is obviously pretty ridiculous. So I check it over to him and he checks it back. It's not looking good since he would probably bluff if he didn't have a hand to win with. And indeed, it's not good at all because we're up against pocket 9s once again. Alright, so let's just move on to the following hand. Once again, the straddle's on, and I look down at King Queen in early position. I raise it up to 120, which is only 3 big blinds. The late position player calls, and the straddler makes the call. So we're off to a flop here, which comes down Ace 10-3 rainbow. The straddle checks it over to me, and I think a c-bet is certainly in order with a gut shot to the nuts and the fact that I'm stuck a bunch of money. So I put in a bet of $120. Late position player folds, but the straddle makes the call. So we're off to a turn card, which is the most miraculous one in the deck, the Jack of Spades. Oh, okay, so finally we have a strong hand here. The straddle checks it to me, and I've been betting all night when I don't have it, so guess what I'm going to do when I have it? I'm going to bet, of course. So I put in a bet of $500, and he snap folds. Man, these guys, they really are too good for me, huh? Every time I don't have it, they call, and when I do have it, they just fold. How do they always know? Anyway, at this point in the night, I had actually been playing for 6 hours. So not only was I running mediocre, but I was also fairly card dead. I did play one more fairly interesting hand, but I missed recording it. I'll tell you guys about it in a minute though, once I do the summary right outside. So let's rack up and call it a night. We'll get them next time. Or maybe not. I don't know. Well, that was obviously not how I hoped tonight would go. There was one more hand near the end that I actually missed filming, but wasn't anything special, just another reflection of how my evening was. I got raised after opening pocket tens. I called, it came 10 high, and actually ended up getting it all in versus a relatively short stack. I think he had like 1,000 or 1,500. He had aces with the heart. There was 2 hearts on the flop, and well, I'm sure you guys can sort of guess where this is going on the turn and river. So lose another one there, and yeah, it seems like every time I take a shot at a bigger game, I get crushed. It happened when I went from 1-3 to 2-5. It happened when I played 5-10 the first few times, and now stepping foot into these 10-20 streets, more of the same. Seems like not the biggest loss, actually, when you consider that the game is 10-20 and often played with a $40 straddle, but it's still a good chunk of money, you know? That's a lot of thousands of dollars that are going to be difficult to get back, but that's exactly what I'm going to try to do, is get that money back. And to watch me do that, you're going to have to subscribe and stay tuned, because there's many more of these in the future. All right, guys, as always, thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who's been around since day one. It's kind of crazy that this vlog started with like 1-2 and 1-3 videos, and now it's this shit. Now I kind of wish it stayed at those stakes, but not really much positive in this video, aside from it is a clear night out here in Vegas with not a lot of winds, and at the very least, a drone flight is in order to sort of make me feel a little better. Anyway, enough of the talk. I'll see you guys next time. As always, thanks for watching. Good luck at the tables. Peace.